Welcome to an overview of the Washington State funding model for Seattle colleges. This presentation will provide you an overview of the new allocation model for the community and technical colleges. Seattle College's operating budget is funded by state allocation and tuition and fees. 65% of that comes from our state, while 35% comes from tuition that includes our state-funded enrollment, our international program, and Running Start. We do get a little bit of indirect cost recovery as well through our grants and contract partnership. Out of this operating budget, about 71% are really dependent on our enrollment. So here's an overview of the Washington Community and Technical College state allocation, again representing about 65% of our operating budget. So the state allocation for community college, better known as really the public good when it comes to higher education investment in our state, it's always important for the community and technical colleges system, and there's 34 districts within our state, that we continue to advocate that we get the right size of the pie, which means including covering all the salary increases, providing for continuous maintenance of efforts, including inflationary costs, and ensuring there's equity in higher education funding, particularly when it comes to universities, regional and research universities, and the community and technical colleges. Once we get our share of that funding, then it is equally important for our system to begin to understand what is the most equitable way to slice the pie or to distribute among the 34 colleges. Thus, the State Board of Community College, in coordination with the colleges within our state, has developed what they call the allocation model. The allocation model really comes into 4 buckets, and that funding and appropriation comes from the legislators through the state board, who then facilitates the distribution of those funds through this allocation model. In addition to that, what's outside the allocation model are set-aside funding, whether it's set-aside funding for compensation, for legislative provisos, and of course, other earmarks. Then each of the colleges also collects tuition and fees from the students, and also some indirect costs or grants and partnerships that are then kept locally. So this is what you will typically hear as local funds. Both this funding then goes to the college district during their budget process and distributed to the college departments for its programs and operations and services. So what is in the allocation model? So the 4 buckets in the allocation model starts with the minimum operating allocation. This is the same allocation regardless of the size of the institution. Consider this as the baseline fixed cost recovery within the model. So for the new upcoming July 1, each of the colleges will now be getting $3.7 million per campus. The next bucket in that allocation model is what we will call the Student Achievement Initiative, which is really similar to a performance funding base. It's about 5% of the total allocation, $61 million for fiscal year 2027, and it's set aside in order to provide incentives to the colleges to help support any student achievement, whether that's graduation or achievement of degree certificates or achieving of math and science the first year or any other momentum points that the system has put together. Then the next part of the money, or the bottom part of this allocation model, is really based on enrollment, starting with the district enrollment allocation base. So each college's enrollment, starting July 1, is now going to be earned through its actual historical enrollment for the last 4 years. So for instance, in fiscal year 2027, our share of the district enrollment allocation base depends on our historical enrollment from fiscal year 22 to 25, both FTE and headcount. In addition to that, 5% of our funding has been set aside in order to provide additional enrollment allocation base for priority, what they call priority enrollment. These are students enrolled in adult basic education and skills gap. What is outside the model, once again, are legislative provisos. And you'll see in here some examples of that, like the guided pathways was a legislative proviso set aside in order to support and provide capacity for the system to really look into guided pathway models. We also set aside money that is provided for salary increases, health benefit changes, pension rates, or any kind of M&O leases. As a system, we've agreed that any kind of compensation or M&O and leases is safe harbor for 4 years. After the 4th year, it goes back and earn as enrollment. And of course, there's also other state board earmarks, again, to provide the system some incentives on particular initiatives or investments. So what does it look like? So in fiscal year 2026, our current fiscal period, the state has received 1.2 billion in state appropriation. About 3% of that, 41 million, has been set aside to support the state board administration, central IT services, and any kind of reserves. So consider the support for city ceiling, that is part of this 3%. Then what's left, again, what's outside the model, the provisos, the earmarks, and the safe harbor are then set aside. And for this fiscal period, that's about 41%. And remember, these are not a very specific expenditure that can only be used for those intended purposes. What's left then for the model is about 55%. 7% of that will be the minimum operating allocation that is taken out first. And then we need to set aside the 5% related to performance funding, and then the other 5% for priority enrollment, leaving about 39% that needs to be distributed based on enrollment. For fiscal year 2027, it looks like as a system, we are gaining about 4.2 million more. And if you look at the formula, once again, 3% is set aside for the state board administration, but this time a number of legislative earmarks and provisos are shifting to the model. So what used to be 41% is down to 36%. That leaves us 61% that can be allocated first and foremost to the MOA, to the performance funding, and then the priority enrollments, setting aside more funding available for the colleges to earn through its enrollment. So what does that look like for Seattle colleges? What is our share of the pie for fiscal year 2027? So the colleges have 3, North, Central, and South. And so when it comes to the minimum operating allocation, each of the college gets 3.7 million. So that's a total of 11.1 million. For the Student Achievement Initiative Fund, the 5% set aside, Seattle colleges is able to earn, because again, this is a point system of student achievements, we are able to earn about 9.39% of the total pot. So that's about 5.1 million. For the historical enrollment, again, the district enrollment allocation base, we are one of the winners, and we are getting about 10.4% of the state total, about 54.3 million. In the old model, we were only getting 9.9%, and now we're getting 10.4%. Priority enrollments, 5% of the state total. Again, we are getting 11.7% of the state total. And when it comes to safe harbor, provisos, and earmark, we're getting 10%. Seattle colleges is really the largest district in our state, and so we typically should anticipate that our share of any of those pots of money at the state allocation, we should be around 10%. So a total of 170 million is what we're anticipating that will be allocated to Seattle colleges. Comparing that for the last fiscal year, where we only got 115, the district-wide, we have gained 2.2 million. However, depending on the formula on how they're distributed, Central, North, and South, there is a redistribution, and of course, District Central Services, there is a redistribution of how that funding model works. And in the next video, I'll be able to break this down and provide you and explain the formula for each one. So 2.2 million additional district-wide. Central has, as part of the reallocations, 1.4 million is reduced at Central. North is gaining 1.4 million. South is gaining 2.8 million. And the district is losing 575,000. If you break it down, On the MOA, all three colleges are gaining the same amount because these are equal amount on all the colleges. The Student Achievement Initiative, or SIA, there's only a 615 distribution, but depending on the points earned, there was a reallocation between the colleges where both North and South has earned more SAI points than Central compared to last year. On the Safe Harbor, we have certainly lost a number of our Safe Harbor, particularly on compensation. So there is a proportionate reduction of the Safe Harbor among the three colleges and the district. Provisos, this again, will provide you a list in another video that will break down how the provisos and earmarks has been distributed to each of the colleges. On the DIV, now based on actual enrollment, including historical enrollment, there is now a reallocation of actual enrollment because the current system is based on target. And so as we go into actual and depending on our historical performance in enrollment, this is now how the funding is being distributed, including priority enrollments. Again, a further breakdown will be provided in another video. So this is how the 2.2 million is distributed among the 4 operating units in Seattle colleges.